Life is precious. But for some, life can't continue without the generosity of others.
Hello. Without the blood and blood products, I wouldn't be alive.
It takes hope,
We just broke down into tears. We didn't really want to let each other go.
courage,
Oh my God, this is really happening for him. So you get really scared because, you know, they might not survive.
and the whole community.
They tell me I have saved the lives of 2.4 million babies.
People that donate blood, they're superheroes.
Feels good doing it, really.
I survived.
I can breathe.
It makes our job so rewarding that you can see what the blood and the blood products can do for someone.
I'm so grateful to be healthy that I squish as much as I can into every day.
We go behind the scenes with Australian Red Cross Lifeblood to share the heartwarming stories of giving life. Now on Giving Life,
She's crushing.
a brave detective defies the odds.
Despite all the blood transfusion that we were giving him, his heart was running on close to empty.
A Melbourne businessman gets the ultimate gift.
We got a phone call at 6 o'clock in the morning and we said, this is it.
And blood besties in high spirits.
We'll be best friends forever.
Happy. She really is happy.
It's Australia Day 2018, a public holiday for most. But for Detective John Breda and his colleagues, it's a work day. They are walking through a pub in Sydney when the unthinkable happens.
We went to arrest an alleged offender. As a result of that event, I was stabbed.
A volley of shots is heard, and John's assailant is dead. John is in real trouble.
I could just feel something going on in my stomach area, and I just put my hands down there and felt the two wounds. And I could see blood starting to come out, and I started to feel a little bit faint. A few moments later, a gentleman walked through the door next to me, and I said to him, "Can you help me? I'm a police officer, I've been stabbed."
Yeah, I saw the guy lying there. He had a white T-shirt on and you could see that there was a lot of blood.
So I started to yell at pressure.
Keep the pressure on.
And he asked me to put as much pressure as I could. I was pushing with all my weight onto his wound. That was giving him a lot of relief. When the ambulance arrived, I just said, "You're going to be all right, mate. The ambos are here."
It's quite hazy about when the ambulance turned up, and I remember them turning up and continuing the pressure, and they put me on the trolley and took me outside and into the back of the ambulance. And then I don't remember anything after that.
One officer suffering 2 stab wounds was taken in a high-speed dash to St Vincent's Hospital in Darlinghurst.
On the way to St Vincent's Hospital, John is crashing fast. A team of the best doctors and specialists are called in on a code crimson.
Someone who is a code crimson is so unstable. You need to take them straight to an operating theatre for an attempt of control of their bleeding and to also resuscitate them at the same time. By the time I got to the operating theatre, John was on the operating table, and the first thing that struck me was that there were all these blood-soaked swabs everywhere.
Still bleeding somewhere. All right, let me check.
And they were essentially trying to get all the blood out of the abdominal cavity and to try and find where things were bleeding from.
It's still bleeding,
There was a cut to the liver, and that had been controlled already.
Good work.
There was a laceration of the lung, which we controlled that quite easily, and that was really a straightforward portion of the operation.
Lungs look good.
At that stage, the focus was on the kidney. I assisted the registrar and fellow in overseeing the kidney, which seemed to stabilise the kidney, and we'd repaired the diaphragm. But it was obvious that there was blood loss from somewhere else in the abdomen.
Losing blood badly.
My anaesthetist kept saying, "Look, we're giving John lots and lots of blood." And he recovers for a short period of time with his blood pressure, but it's continuing to drop. It was apparent that there must be torrential bleeding ongoing, and that bleeding essentially was internalised. It was very difficult to pick up. But once that we realised that this bleeding was occurring, We actually got closer to the source and it became very obvious that the blood was still pouring out of John. And we really, at this stage, were starting to lose the battle with John.
He's crushing.
How does he work out 5?
56-year-old Craig Wood is a Melbourne businessman with a wife and 4 children. He loves to spend time outdoors, which keeps him fit. But this wasn't always the case.
Going back to 2004, went to the snow with my family and some friends, and being in the high altitude, walking through the snow, I struggled to breathe. It was like I was always huffing and puffing and thought that wasn't right. I then went to a lung specialist and had x-rays on my lungs, and it was determined I had a disease called alpha-1 antitrypsin.
Alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency is an inherited form of emphysema, and if you have the full-blown form and you've inherited the abnormal gene from both of your parents, then you're going to develop very severe lung disease at a very early age.
They told us, because it's genetic, it wasn't worth getting the kids tested at this stage because there's nothing they can do, there's no cure. So it was pretty upsetting.
When you're sitting at about 25% predicted lung capacity, and it should be 80%, essentially you're trying to drive an 8-cylinder car on 2 cylinders.
Dr. Farmer said over time it'll get worse, but typically nothing would happen until it affects your quality of life.
We were told he probably wouldn't live past 60, 65, so that was all we had.
I got used to it in the end because it was a part of my life. I'd see the doctor every 6 to 12 months, do a lung function test, and typically that was fairly well steady. There wasn't much deterioration in it, so I just figured that's what I'd be like for the rest of my life.
6 months later, however, Craig's body was sending him messages he couldn't ignore.
I felt the lungs were getting worse. I'm puffing more. Something's dramatically changed.
It was really obvious to me that he was deteriorating. He was doing a lot less.
I suppose that's when the realisation was that, this is getting big.
Craig is referred to the Alfred Hospital for a possible double lung transplant.
Snell, how you going? Good to see you again. Thank you.
Craig came to me with around 20 to 25% lung function.
So just in a...
First observation is of seeing someone walk down the corridor towards you and realising with someone like Craig that they're going about half the speed of a normal person.
Our plan for the testing...
Right from the start, you have to sit down and explain what we're thinking of, why it's got to be considered, and then the vague timeframes that can possibly occur. And it's a lot for someone to get their head around.
Craig's blood samples are sent to lifeblood processing centres around Australia.
Before someone can actually go onto a transplant waiting list, we have to receive samples from them and perform a range of testing, including an HLA typing, a blood group. We perform a screen on them to see if they've got any antibodies, which might result in rejection of an organ. Once all that testing has been completed, they get activated onto our transplant waiting list.
That was going to take 3 months, 6 months, 2 years, whatever. We didn't know.
We didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know anything. We just didn't know what the future held for us.
St Vincent's Hospital surgeons are fighting a losing battle to save Detective John Bredder's life.
He's losing output.
With knife wounds to his kidney, liver and diaphragm, the surgical team are trying to stabilise John. But then his kidney starts to hemorrhage. He's bleeding out again.
Despite all the blood transfusion that we were giving him, his heart was running on close to empty.
We need more blood.
But what was remarkable about John's heart was that it was so strong and it kept going. The knife that John was attacked with was obviously not just a skin scratch, it was inserted up to its hilt. It was a big cut, went through the skin, through his muscle of his abdomen, through his liver, then actually went through the top half of his kidney, and then through the kidney up through the diaphragm into the lung.
John is being kept alive by transfusions, but he is continuing to lose blood from his kidney area.
We'd already been going for about 2 to 3 hours, trying to gain control of the blood loss. The backup plan was to clamp the blood supply to the entire lower half of the body, but some of the consequences could have been that his bowel could have died and he could have sustained an injury to his spinal cord and never walked again.
We need help.
So that's when we called Tony Grabs, who's a vascular surgeon but also a trauma surgeon, and said, "Tony, do you mind coming in and giving us a hand? We seem to have some issues with bleeding here." And at that stage, someone said, "Oh, on the radio it's been announced that the gentleman that you're operating on has just entered ICU and is stable and doing well." And I knew the exact opposite really was happening.
Melbourne businessman Craig Wood was accepted onto the lung transplant list. The process of finding an organ match is complex. While Donate Life manage organ transplants across the country, Lifeblood plays a critical role in tissue matching between donor and recipient.
We receive a phone call from Donate Life to let us know that there's a potential donor. Where's it coming from? And it can happen at any time of the day or night. You do have to move quickly. Once those organs are actually retrieved, there is a rather limited time frame that they can be transplanted into recipients, usually about 6 hours for hearts and lungs.
Hello. We got a phone call at 6 o'clock in the morning, and it was the Alfred Hospital. The hospital said, "You need to be in here within an hour and a half." My wife looked at me, and we said, "This is it."
Fortunately for Craig, he waited only 6 days on the waiting list, and that is remarkable.
Going into the hospital was really scary. You don't know what to expect.
Craig's at risk of kidneys and heart and other organs being stressed during the surgery, and he's at risk of all sorts of other complications. It's a complex procedure, and everyone has to be prepared for some drama.
Katia and Daniel are best friends. Not only do they share the same Italian heritage, both have a blood disorder called thalassemia major.
We're blood buddies.
They receive treatment every 4 weeks at Westmead Children's Hospital.
Thalassemia is an inherited condition where they can't produce the protein haemoglobin, which is what carries oxygen around the blood. They rely on blood transfusions to survive.
When I was pregnant with Daniel, we had a test done and the test come back positive that Daniel had thalassemia major. His transfusion started, I think he was about 18 months old.
I found out Katia had thalassemia at 5 months. She started transfusions just before her second birthday.
Oh, thank you.
Around a year after we started transfusion, we decided to sync up our appointments just because the kids were so happy seeing each other. You know, they played together, they laughed, they cried, they've done a lot together.
Date of birth?
When the kids come each month for their transfusions, they have to have a blood sample sent to the laboratory so that we can do the cross-match, work out what their haemoglobin is so we know how much blood to give them.
And then we will centrifuge them and process them, make sure they're compatible with the units that have been donated.
Once Katia and Daniel have completed their testing, the next step is transfusion. St Vincent's Hospital trauma surgeon Tony Grabs is racing down the highway in an effort to save the life of Detective John Breda. Meanwhile, John is being kept alive by a new order of blood that's been sent over by Lifeblood.
When I arrived at the operation, Dr. Granger had been into the chest, Dr. Gett had been in for a laparotomy to try and help bleeding from the liver, and Dr. Kuno was there also managing the kidney bleeding. And the anaesthetist was having trouble with his blood pressure.
Maintain pressure. At that stage, it was the edge of the cliff moment for John.
Okay, I need better access.
Everything was very swollen. It became fairly obvious to me early that we'd have to move tissue around to be able to get to the aorta and to the renal artery. And the only way that we were able to do that was actually opening up the chest also. When the chest was open, it allowed me to mobilise tissues around the aorta so I could see things. All I needed to do was control the artery to the kidney close to the aorta. I put a lasso around the artery, and then I was able to put a clamp on that artery.
There it is.
Yep.
Ready?
Yep.
Go.
Got it.
Interestingly, the anaesthetist said, he's getting better. His blood pressure is raised.
Maintain.
And at that stage, I knew that the bleeding predominantly had stopped.
Sit. And that was really the moment where everyone could take a deep breath and really gather themselves. During the resuscitation, we processed approximately 15 litres of John's blood. So John essentially had his blood volume replaced almost 3 times. At the end, I took a photo of all the blood products on the floor and I got John ready to go back to intensive care, as had been announced several hours before.
To get that much blood requires over 100 donors.
Now, no one person in that room could have done the entire resuscitation by themselves, or even with another sort of training doctor or registrar.
And in John's case, it was quite remarkable. He needed 4 different types of surgeons to help his condition so that we could stop the bleeding.
The immediate danger is over, but John still has a long way to go. At Westmead Children's Hospital, Katia and Daniel are having their monthly blood transfusions. Both have a blood disorder called thalassemia major.
She gets 3 bags of blood, which can sometimes be up to approximately 800 mils of blood, and it takes about 5 hours.
What's the date? Okay.
Going back to the beginning, it was a lot to take on. There was a lot of crying. Now she's going in, having the transfusions, and happy. She really is happy.
Yes. Okay, I'm going first. If she was in a different hospital, I wouldn't be happy right now. You'd be so lonely. I'd be so lonely.
The people that donate are amazing. We appreciate it so much. You're giving life to my daughter.
We just can't be more grateful to these blood donors who are able to give them that opportunity to live a normal, full life.
After transfusions, she just looks like she's had an amazing day. She's glowing, and that's just because she's just had her blood, her life put back into her.
And I thank him so much for this blood. Fresh.
Katia and Daniel will need blood transfusions for the rest of their lives.
See ya. Bye.
But that's it for this month.
We'll be best friends forever.
At the Alfred Hospital, 56-year-old Craig Wood is about to have a double lung transplant. His family are in for an anxious wait.
Oh my God, this is really happening for him, so you get really scared because, they might not survive. We were fairly lucky. His operation was 5 hours, 5.5 hours.
And then Mum came in at 10:30, I think, and told us that the operation was a success, and that was a really uplifting moment that we knew that he was okay.
So waking up went like that, and I felt like I could breathe in and breathe in and breathe in and breathe in and breathe in. It was like, wow, that was biggest breath I've ever taken. Then I exhaled it, and it was like, wow, I can breathe. My lung function tests are really good now. It's over 100%. From where I was before, my life is just amazing.
It's an incredibly rewarding job, knowing that you're helping to save people's lives.
I'd like to thank the donor family. You wouldn't believe how it's changed my life. I have a grandchild I run around and play with. I play golf now. I play Masters baseball. I've got a caravan. My wife and I go away. And my life is just amazing.
After a second operation to remove bandages and repair more tissue damage, John Breda finally opened his eyes.
I remember waking up in ICU 4 days, I think it was 4 days later. Not too sure where I was, but I knew I was alive. But I couldn't move because of the operation that I had. I was getting chills through my body and my legs. And it was hot, it was summertime, and why was I getting these chills?
So John would have had his entire blood volume replaced with other people's blood, which sounds a remarkable thing, but in terms of keeping someone alive in the short term, it's volume that makes the difference. He would have felt very unwell, but the interesting thing about young, fit people is within a week or two, his bone marrow would have been able to make enough blood to replace his blood volume.
While John's life was hanging in the balance, the community rallied for a policeman in need of life-saving blood donations.
The support we've received has been overwhelming. The New South Wales Police put forward the Bleed for Blue, so people came in all across the state and gave blood in relation to what had happened to me. I didn't know what was happening at the time, but it was fantastic to hear later on. The lifeblood centres were overwhelmed with so many police officers that they had to turn them away and for them to come back another day. I'm back to being active as I was before. The long walks, the gym, the swimming, and things are back to sort of normal as they were. But I see things differently, but in a good way, to help people, so that's what I'm going to continue to do. Everybody that works in St Vincent's Hospital really don't get enough recognition for what they do. There's not enough praise for these people. These people saved my life. Without the blood, without the nurses, the doctors, their expertise, without their teamwork, I wouldn't be here today.
Next time on Giving Life. A star blood donor goes on a life-changing journey.
What the heck am I doing at a place like this?
A young scientist is on a quest.
Because there was no diagnosis, there was no treatment.
And two students take to the highway to save lives.
I wanted to donate at every lifeblood centre in New South Wales.